Yeah, I used to have Fran Lebowitz on the Majority Report. I think we had her a couple times on the Sam Seder Show. And she said the biggest problem with liberals. And she was talking about, I mean, Fran Lebowitz runs in rather specific circles in New York City. But there is a breed of liberals who they're liberal on everything except when it comes to money issues. And that's ultimately what we're talking about. That's ultimately why, there's an attempt to poo-poo bloggers. Because bloggers are just people. They're just citizens who are using a new technology to amplify their voices. That's all it is. But that's very dangerous to the establishment. Very, very dangerous to the establishment. And it's particularly dangerous to the left establishment in this country. Because on the right, those people are so tuned into an authoritarian worldview. They're not going to do anything online that their leaders don't tell them to do anyways. But on the left, that's where it becomes very dangerous. The great unwashed, who now have access to a distribution mechanism where money is not a bar to entry. That is very terrifying to people. And believe me, there is a bar to entry on radio. There is a bar to entry on radio. But there isn't online. Generation ago, according to MSNBC, American men in their 30s had median annual incomes of $40,000 compared with men of the same age who now make about $35,000 a year. Going backwards, folks. Household income is up. But that's because you have more two-family breadwinners. Bill in Queens, New York. Welcome to the program, Bill.
Sam, how you doing?
Good. How you doing?
On these Democrats in the war, look, before you said the Democrats need to explain certain things to the electorate, but I feel that the electorate is ahead of the Democratic leadership on this issue. They want out of Iraq. Now, when you look at the best case of what the Democratic leadership has offered, their non-binding proposal that had timelines, that had benchmarks, they were calling for the withdrawal only of combat troops. That would leave 80,000 troops for so-called anti-terrorist operations, 100,000 plus private contractors, far from a total withdrawal. Moreover, what was in those benchmarks the Democratic leadership was proposing? An endorsement, one of the benchmarks was the production sharing agreement that calls for U.S. and Western oil companies to get 75% of Iraqi oil, a theft of Iraqi oil. Mm-hmm. So my feeling is that the Democratic leadership, which is sort of controlling this legislative process, shares many of the geopolitical objectives of the Bush administration, not all the tactical orientations, but many of the objectives, and they are manipulating this process to stall, to temporize, to do the old soft shoe, to bamboozle the base into thinking they're making anti-war moves while continuing to fund the war and continuing to essentially support many of the geopolitical objectives of the major corporate interests that are behind this misadventure.
I think you're partially right on this, Bill, and I think you're partially wrong. Okay, I mean, I do think that the Democratic the people who, Carl Levin, when he went on to whatever show it was today, and said, look, the American public knows that we voted against this war. We had the timetables, blah, blah, blah. But we will not desert the troops. I think he thinks he's pulling one over on people. But does the Democratic Party as a whole really care? I mean, I'm talking about the leadership in the House. Do they really care about that Iraqi oil bill, whether it's 75% to those foreign oil companies or 0%? I don't think so. I just don't think I think their attitude is the American public doesn't really, in the final analysis, care that much.
Well, Sam, I mean, look, it's there in the bill. They endorsed it. Now, the other thing is, look beyond the war for a second. Democratic leadership, they've been in a while now. There is no push for any repeal of the Patriot Act, Military Commissions Act, tax cuts for the rich, did a big El Soldo on trade. There was a prophet without honor who said a couple of years ago during the election, he said, not that there are no differences between the parties, but there are few major differences that the Democrats are willing to fight over. That prophet without honor, I think, is pretty much vindicated now, and I think a lot of people owe an apology to Ralph Nader.
Well, wait a second, Bill. Now, I think there's some of what you're saying is accurate, but the question is, how do you deal with it? Okay, first off, I do not believe for a moment that we would be in Iraq right now if if Al Gore had been president. I don't believe it for a second. And it's almost indisputable. I mean, because there's absolutely no logic whatsoever to that. Had we had
read the speech he gave to the Council on Foreign Relations.
It doesn't make a difference to me what speech he gave where.
He was
I'm sorry.
For war against Iraq in February 2002, and then when he saw a chance to co-opt this from out of office,
Bill,
as a left posturing, suddenly became anti-war.
That may be the case, Bill. In 2002, maybe he did give a speech saying that he was for a war against Iraq. I don't know. I can tell you if he was president on 9/12/2001, he would not be calling in Richard Clark and saying, find me anything you can on Iraq.
Then why aren't his colleagues defunding the war? They're not serious about it.
Well, first of all, Bill, listen, I agree with you to a certain extent. I appreciate the call. I mean, I do think that there is a corporatist problem in the Democratic Party. I mean, I just spent 5-10 minutes saying that. And I think the way you deal with it is, you can choose to vote for whoever you want. But I'm looking to put more and more people into office who are talking about populism, or talking about economic populism. A guy like Jim Webb, who's the first person I've seen on national television, he's a Democrat, come out strongly and talk about how much money corporate CEOs are making relative to your average worker. I would love every single one of our senators to be Bernie Sanders. If you have the solution, email it me at samcedershow@gmail.com. Tell me how I can get Bernie Sanders cloned and then made all of our senators. And Frank, if you come up with that solution, tell me how I can make half of those Bernadette Sanders. So I'd like to see more women in the Senate, too. And also with a greater representation of different races. But I think you get my message. We'll be right back.
Sam Seder, launching an illegal invasion and occupation of your brain.